Hello. Now we're going to study one more person that was very important in the civil rights movement. Her name was Ruby Bridges, and she was about your age. This is one of my favorite people to study. So, we're going to read this book, Ruby Bridges Goes to School, My True Story, and it is written by Ruby Bridges. So this is called an autobiography because she wrote the book about herself. And here's a picture of Ruby. I love these pictures. All right, here we go. A long time ago, some people thought that black people and white people should not be friends. In some places, black people were not allowed to live in the same neighborhoods as white people. And up here, here's a sign, and it says, "We want white tenants in our white community." And over here, this boy is holding a sign that says, "We won't go to school with Negroes." And that was another name for African Americans back then. We don't use those names anymore. So as you can see, back then, things were not equal. In some places, black people were not allowed to eat in the same restaurants as white people. And over here, we have for colored, Booker T. Washington, like iced tea. And here, this says white only. So that means unless you had white skin, you could not eat in that restaurant. And in some places, black children and white children could not go to the same schools. This is called segregation. And we have talked a lot about segregation. So the United States government said segregation is wrong. People should live where they want. People should eat where they want. Children should go to school where they want. And here are some pictures. Do you see the difference in this picture and this picture? This was before. This is while segregation was still in play. And then you'll see a difference toward the end of the story. My name is Ruby Bridges. In 1960, I went to kindergarten in a school for black children. I liked my school. I liked my teacher. I liked my friends. And here is Ruby. But there was a school for white children even closer to my house than the school for black children. It was the William Frantz Elementary School. The government said Ruby Bridges should be allowed to go to the William Frantz School. And so this is actually a picture of the school, and here are some children going into the school. In 1961, I was in first grade. My mother took me to the Frantz School. Marshals came with us to make sure that we were safe. So these guys were U.S. Marshals, and they were there to keep the crowds away. Some people did not want a black child to go to the white school. They stood near the school. They yelled at me to go away. And you can see why they needed the U.S. Marshals, because there were crowds all outside the school. And they were holding up signs. This one says, "We want segregation." This one says, "We don't want to integrate." Integrate meant for people to come together, which is the opposite of segregation. Parents took their children out of the school. I was alone with my teacher, Mrs. Henry. So here is Ruby, here's Mrs. Henry. And the other children didn't come to school, so she had the teacher all to herself. I loved Mrs. Henry, and Mrs. Henry loved me. I was a very good student. I learned math, I learned how to read, but I wish the children would come back. And here's another picture of Mrs. Henry. Months and months passed. Then one day, children began to come back to school. At last, I had friends to play with. I was very, very happy. And now you see, the faces look different. And they can all go to school together. Many people have read about me in newspapers and books. A famous writer, John Steinbeck, wrote about me. He wrote that I was very brave. And this is John Steinbeck. A First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote a letter to me. The letter told me that I was a good American. Norman Rockwell was an artist who painted a picture of me. The painting has become very famous. And so this is a Norman Rockwell painting, and he is a famous artist. And you can see on their sleeves, they have Deputy U.S. Marshal. And Ruby's carrying her books to go to school. Now I am grown up. I am married. I have children. One day, Mrs. Henry and I were both asked to be on a TV show. That was the first time we had seen each other in many years. Now we talk to each other often. So here is Ruby, all grown up, and here is Mrs. Henry. Now black children and white children can go to the same schools. I like to visit schools. I tell my story. I tell children that black people and white people can be friends. And here she is talking to children. And most important, I tell children to be kind to each other. And here's another picture of her class when the children came back. All right, so that was a quick book, but again, one of my favorite stories. And we can learn a lot from Ruby, and we can learn a lot from the other people who did not want Ruby in their school, and we can learn how that was wrong. And now things have changed so that we can all be in school together. Well, until next time.